$68. That's what the ribeye section of my grocery store wanted for 4 steaks last month, and I stood there long enough that an employee asked if I needed help. I bought them anyway, and when I mentioned it to an 81-year-old butcher named Dale out in Lampasas, Texas, he laughed at me for a solid 10 seconds. But then he walked me into his cooler, pulled out one single roast that cost me $52, and showed me how to cut 23 steaks out of it. Real steaks. And one of them tastes so close to ribeye that I fooled my own brother-in-law with it. I'm going to walk you through the whole thing, exactly the way Dale showed me, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. You'll know what to ask for at the meat counter, where to make the cuts, and which steak hiding inside that roast is the one the old Texas butchers used to keep for themselves. First, you need to understand why ribeye costs what it costs, because the answer is the whole trick. A steer weighs around 300 pounds on the hoof. Out of that entire animal, you get maybe 16 pounds of ribeye. That's it. Every steakhouse in America, every backyard griller, every grocery chain is fighting over the same tiny strip of muscle that runs along the upper back between the 6th and 12th ribs. Scarcity sets the price, not flavor. The last time I checked my local H-E-B, choice ribeye was sitting around $15 to $16 a pound, and prime was north of $20. But here's the thing Dale told me while he was sharpening his knife, and I want you to picture this because it changed how I buy beef forever. That ribeye muscle, the big one in the center of the steak, the one butchers call the eye, it doesn't start at the 6th rib and it doesn't stop there either. It's one long muscle that runs up through the animal's shoulder. The moment it crosses an invisible line on the butcher's chart, the exact same muscle stops being called ribeye and starts being called chuck. And the price falls off a cliff. Same muscle, same marbling. Roughly a third of the price. Just because of where somebody drew a line 100 years ago. The chuck is the shoulder. It's the workhorse of the animal, so parts of it are tough. And that reputation is why the whole section sells cheap. Your grandmother pot roasted chuck because she was told that's all it was good for. What she was never told, and what guys like Dale have known since the 1960s, is that the shoulder is not one texture. It's a bundle of maybe a dozen different muscles all wrapped together, and hiding inside that bundle are 3 of the most tender, most flavorful steaks on the entire animal. The grocery store grinds most of them into hamburger because separating them takes 10 minutes of knife work that a chain store won't pay for. So the trick is simple to say and takes one afternoon to learn. You stop buying steaks, you buy the roast they're hiding in, and you do those 10 minutes of knife work yourself. Here's exactly what to ask for. Go to a real meat counter, a butcher shop, or a grocery store that still cuts in-house and ask for a whole boneless chuck roll, untrimmed if they'll sell it that way. Some places call it a chuck eye roll. It's a big log of beef, usually somewhere between 15 and 20 pounds, and it'll be vacuum sealed in heavy plastic. Mine weighed just over 17 pounds and rang up at $3 and change per pound. If the counter guy looks at you funny, ask him to order one. They come in a case from the distributor, and most shops are happy to sell one whole because it saves them the labor. Now, before you panic about butchering, let me tell you what Dale told me. You are not performing surgery. Beef muscles are wrapped in thin, silvery membranes, and those membranes are seams. The animal already did the hard work of separating everything. Your job is just to follow the seams with your fingers and the tip of a knife, and the muscles practically fall apart from each other. He calls it letting the meat tell you where to cut. You need a sharp boning knife, or even a decent chef's knife, a big cutting board, and a couple of sheet pans to stage everything on. Lay the chuck roll down and look at it from the end that was cut away from the rib section. You'll see it right away. There's a round eye of muscle in there, well marbled, and it looks familiar because it is familiar. That's the longissimus dorsi, the exact muscle you've been paying ribeye money for. Where you're looking at it, it's called the chuck eye. Old timers in Texas called it the poor man's ribeye. And Dale says back in the day, butchers would quietly set those aside and take them home because customers didn't know to ask, and there are only a couple of them per animal at retail. When they show up in a grocery case at all, they sell out by 9 a.m. The first cuts you make are the easy ones. Starting from that rib end, slice straight across the roll and take off steaks about 1.25 inches thick. The first 5 or 6 steaks off that end are your chuck eyes, and they're the crown jewels of this whole project. Wrap those separately, label them, guard them. As you keep slicing toward the neck end, the eye of the muscle gets smaller and other muscles crowd in around it. This is where you switch from slicing to seam work. Work your thumb into the natural separations and start pulling the bundle apart. The big flat muscle that peels off the top is the one that becomes Denver steaks once you trim the silver skin off it. The Denver cut wasn't even sold as a steak until 2009, when the beef industry funded a muscle profiling study at the University of Nebraska in Florida that went hunting through the chuck for tender muscle they could sell as something better than grind. The Denver came out of that research ranked among the most tender cuts on the whole carcass. Your grandmother's pot roast had a fillet-adjacent steak buried inside it her entire life, and nobody told her. Off my 17-pound roll, here is what ended up on my sheet pans. 6 chuck eye steaks, 8 Denver steaks, 5 steaks off the underblade section. 4 smaller ones Dale calls country steaks from the neck end pieces, which are a little chewier, so those get marinated. That's 23. Plus almost 3 pounds of trim and scraps that went straight into the grinder for burgers, and a bag of silver skin and fat for the stock pot, because in Dale's shop, nothing hits the trash can. Total cost, $52. The same count of steaks out of the ribeye case would have run me somewhere past $250. I did the math twice because I didn't believe it the first time. That math is the whole reason I put this system on paper. After that afternoon in Lampasas, I wrote everything down, the cut maps, the seam-by-seam photos, the cook temps, and the smoke recipes I use on every one of these cuts, and turned it into a full guide called the Texas BBQ Playbook. If you want the version of this video you can hold in one hand at the cutting board, that's it. The link's in the description or scan the QR on screen. Alright, back to the meat because I haven't even told you about the best steak in the shoulder yet. Cooking these is where people mess it up, so let me save you my mistakes. A chuck eye is 90% ribeye by nature, but it has one weakness. There's a seam of connective tissue running through part of it, and if you cook it past medium, that seam turns to rubber. Hot and fast, pull it at 130 degrees internal, rest it 5 minutes. Treat it exactly like the ribeye it almost is, and it will reward you. Overcook it, and you'll swear the whole trick was a lie. The Denver wants the same treatment, screaming hot cast iron or directly over coals, about 4 minutes aside. The country steaks from the neck end are the only ones that need help. Give them a night in a marinade with something acidic and slice them thin against the grain, and they eat like the best fajita meat you've ever had. But I still owe you the steak Dale kept for himself because it's not the chuck eye. Underneath the shoulder blade in the flat iron region of the chuck sits a muscle called the infraspinatus. Once you pull the thick membrane out of its center, the flat iron is, by the industry's own tenderness testing, the second most tender cut on the entire animal. Only the tenderloin beats it, and the tenderloin has almost no fat, while the flat iron is ribboned with it. Dale's been cutting meat since Eisenhower was president, and when I asked him the best steak on the steer, he didn't hesitate. He tapped the flat iron. If you buy a whole chuck that includes the blade section, or ask your butcher to add a flat iron to your order for a few dollars a pound, you're getting what may be the single most underpriced piece of beef in America. So I ran the test. 2 steaks on my kettle grill, 1 prime ribeye from the store at $22 a pound, 1 chuck eye from my $3 roll, cooked identically, sliced, unlabeled. My brother-in-law has eaten steak twice a week for 20 years and considers himself an authority on it, which is exactly why I picked him. He chewed, went back for a second piece of each, and pointed at the chuck eye. "That one," he said. "That one's the ribeye." He argued with me even after I showed him the receipt. My wife got it right, but she admitted it was close enough that she was half guessing off the shape of the slice, not the flavor. That's the part that stuck with me. It's not that the cheap steak passed for the expensive one. It's that a man who thought he knew steak picked the shoulder over the rib with his own mouth, and the only thing that had ever kept him away from it was a word on a label. Which makes you wonder how the pricing stays the way it is. Part of it is habit. Part of it is that seam butchery takes labor and grocery chains would rather grind. And part of it, Dale thinks, is that the industry has no reason to advertise that the 16 pounds of ribeye on a steer has a cheaper twin sitting right next door. The knowledge used to pass from butcher to customer over the counter, and when the counters disappeared into plastic wrap cases, the knowledge went with them. Dale is 81. Most of the men he apprenticed with are gone. When I asked him why he shows this stuff to anybody who walks in and asks, he shrugged and said a trick nobody remembers isn't a trick anymore. It's just meat going into a grinder. So here's what I keep turning over, and I'd like to know where you land on it. We pay triple for the name of a muscle, while the muscle itself, same fibers, same marbling, gets ground into $5 hamburger a few inches away. Is that just the market doing what markets do? Or did we all quietly trade away something our grandparents knew and let the label think for us? Tell me in the comments, and tell me if your butcher will even sell you a whole chuck roll, because I'm collecting answers from every state. If this saved you money, subscribe, because next week I'm doing the same teardown on a whole pork shoulder, and the numbers on that one are even more ridiculous. Word count 2074.